Hi, it's Steph, and I'm at Lowe's, and it is now May, which means the garden center is in full swing, friends. There are tons of new shrubs, trees, perennials, and beautiful summer annuals. So let's go ahead and take a look at the May inventory at Lowe's. Look at this beautiful perennial. This is the Opening Act Ultraviolet Pink Phlox by Proven Winners, and it is such a gorgeous, vibrant pink garden phlox. Now, you can find phloxes that bloom at different times and in different heights. So in early spring, you will see the ground cover phloxes, and then as the later spring and summer come in, you will see different varieties of garden phlox, which are typically taller. They do come in different heights. The one thing to know about growing phlox is some of the older varieties are prone to powdery mildew, which means you should give them proper spacing to improve airflow around the plant and prevent that happening on your foliage. So it'll look like a powdery substance on the foliage. I have one variety in my garden that is highly susceptible to it, but most of my other varieties, like the newer Proven Winners ones that have been improved, are a lot better. There are still lots of bloom buds on these. The pollinators absolutely love them, and some of them are even really fragrant, like the woodland phloxes. So this variety by Proven Winners, the Opening Act Ultra Pink Phlox, loves full sun. All phloxes, with the exception of the woodland phloxes and even the ground covers, would like more sun. And this variety gets to be 22 to 28 inches in height, needs 32-inch minimum spacing, and it is hardy in zones 4 through 8 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And it blooms early summer through late summer, but a really pretty staple garden perennial. And if you want to add some wonderful fragrance to your garden, this is a great perennial. Lavender. This one is in full bloom. It is a Proven Winners variety. It is called the Sweet Romance Lavender, and it is hardy in zones 5 through 9. It wants 12 to 18-inch spacing and 12 to 18-inch height, and it blooms summer through early fall. Long blooming, fragrant, and the pollinators love it. Now, lavender does love full sun. It also loves a very well-draining soil. And speaking of fragrant plants and phloxes, this is a woodland phlox, which has a wonderful floral fragrance, and it can be grown in more shade, a part sun to part shade location. Now, I had grown the purple variety before and something ate on it, probably the bunnies. So if that's something that you deal with, something to be aware of. But if you want a blooming plant for a shadier garden, this could be a great option. And I absolutely love the fragrance. There's a little breeze going on in here, and the smell is wafting in the air, and it smells wonderful. Tons of buds still left on this, and the variety is called May Breeze, which seems very appropriate for today. And it gets to be, it looks like 12 inches in height, 14 inches in width, hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Keep soil moist after first year. It's going to be pretty drought tolerant, and it wants part sun. And these are in the Lowe's house brand 2-quart containers, which I believe there is still a sale going on at my store. And they are, here it is. This is a Lowe's deal, limited time, 2 for $10 on their house brand 2-quart containers of perennials. And this sale is going on through the 6th of May here in my location. It's part of their Spring Fest sale, and I know that different stores have been running this sale during different weeks, so check your location to see if it might still be going on. And the purple variety of woodland phlox is called the Blue Moon, and it is also hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit and has a similar growth size of 12 inches in height and 18 inches in width. It's a mounding perennial for part sun, part shade. Also have some great options for shade here at my Lowe's today. Check out these beautiful light blue flowers that look like forget-me-nots, but it's actually the blooms on Brunnera, which is an excellent foliage plant for a shady garden, but it blooms in spring. This is the Queen of Hearts Brunnera by Proven Winners. It gets to be an average height of about 18 inches and can get somewhere between 28 and 36 inches in width over time. And as it's done blooming, the foliage will get a lot larger, and it has these really interesting heart-shaped leaves with some silver coloration, which really lights up a shady spot. But these light blue flowers are a bonus in the spring. And right beside it is actually a plant that I have in my own garden that's starting to pop through the soil now here in my zone 6B, 7A. Of course, all of the ones at the nursery are going to be a little bit further ahead, but it's amsonia. And amsonia is a great plant because not only does it bloom in spring, many of the varieties also get fall color. So their foliage will turn shades of like gold and butterscotch in the fall season. So this one here is the Storm Cloud Amsonia by Proven Winners. It was the Landscape Perennial of the Year in 2024. It likes full sun, part sun, and for 1 gallon it's $15.98, and the size on these are a medium height of about 24 to 30 inches, and it needs 38 to 42 inch spacing, hardy in zones 4 through 9 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And it blooms late spring through early summer. And what I love about these Proven Winners tags, if I haven't mentioned it yet today, or if you haven't noticed it, is that it does tell you some pairing suggestions. So just like wines and cheeses, you can pair plants, and this makes it easy. So it says to pair this Amsonia with rose mallow or hibiscus, coral bells, hosta, and Shasta daisies. Another great option for shade are foliage plants such as heucheras, tiarellas, etc. And this here is a heucherella, which is a cross between a heuchera and a tiarella, known as a foam flower. Now this variety, this is the first time I've seen it sold here at Lowe's. It is the Fun and Games Red Rova Heucherella Hybrid. It likes to be in part shade to shade, $12.98 for this 2-quart container, and it is hardy in zones 4 through 9, needs 18 to 20 inch spacing, and gets to be about 6 to 8 inches in height. Now these Red Rover Heucherellas do bloom like most heucheras and tiarellas. They send up these bloom stalks at some point in the season, and as these buds open up, they look like sprays of baby's breath, and this variety looks like it's going to have a really light, creamy peach colored bloom. The pollinators absolutely love them, but if you don't like the bloom stalks, you can just follow that stem down to where the foliage tuft begins and cut it off. I showed this variety of heuchera the last time we were here at Lowe's, and they still have quite a bit of it. It is the Caramel Coral Bells by Monrovia. This is one of the heucheras that performed the best for me in my garden. Underneath the foliage, you can see it has this really pretty kind of reddish orange color, and on top it looks like a caramel kind of yellow. It goes through several color changes throughout the season. This is one that does like a part shade to shade location. If you have it in too much sun, the leaves, because they are so light, can crisp up, and it also likes a moist but well draining soil. So here is the information on this one, the Monrovia Caramel Coral Bells. It says full sunshade. It definitely cannot take full sun. I would say only like it says here, 1 to 3 hours of morning sun, which is a bit softer than afternoon sun, or even full shade. It likes a semi-moist but well-draining soil, and this variety gets to be 10 to 14 inches in height and needs 14 to 16 inch spacing. Hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and these are $13.98 in the Monrovia containers. Here's a great option in the Lowe's house brand containers, and they are part of the sale because I actually picked these up a few days ago. They're the Lemon Love Coral Bells, and it is a heuchera that has this really pretty kind of chartreuse greeny yellow color with red veining. I actually planted them underneath my Fire Glow Japanese maple, which has red foliage, and I think that the Japanese maple is going to provide great shade for this plant, and it's going to pick up on this red veining and look really pretty together. Now this variety, let's see how big it gets. It's pretty compact. It gets to be 10 to 14 inches in height, needs 28 to 32 inch spacing, and it is hardy down to zone 4 or negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't think that mine will get that large because I have terrible luck with heucheras and tiarellas in my garden, but I am going to give it a shot, and it is deer resistant, which is excellent. And Polemonium, or Jacob's Ladder. And what's great about this plant is that it blooms in the spring, and you get these really pretty lavender purple blooms, but it also has a really pretty foliage that looks like a fern. So it has a lot of texture. So even when not in bloom, it's really important to look at the foliage of plants because you are left with the foliage long after the blooms are done. And as you can see, the pollinators absolutely love this plant as well. It's hanging on right there and getting a little snack. Adorable. Here is the information on the Heaven Sent Polemonium. It is listed as a full sun part shade plant. I would say morning sun and afternoon shade would be best. And this is a 1 gallon container for $15.98. It has a medium height of 18 to 24 inches in height and needs 15 to 18 inch spacing. Hardy in zones 3 through 7 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And it blooms late spring. It likes full sun to part shade. Some gorgeous Monrovia trees and shrubs here at Lowe's. And look at this Japanese maple maple that is currently all leafed out. Gorgeous. These are the traditional Acer palmatum leaves, and this is likely a blood good because that is usually the most common variety that you will find here at the local box store nursery. It is a blood good Japanese maple, great variety. I actually have 3 of these in my garden. They are a medium-sized tree, getting anywhere from about 15 to 20 feet tall and wide over time. It does like a part shade location. It can thrive in a little bit of sun. After several years, it will start to acclimate, and as long as it gets ample moisture, it'll do fine. You're better off planting these high versus too low. The root flare should be exposed. So if you do mulch, make sure that you leave the root flare, you know, the feet of the plant, this part here that starts to pop out, make sure you leave that exposed. You don't want to bury it under mulch because it can cause some rotting and will decline the health of your plant. But these are excellent landscape specimen trees. They bring a lot of color, especially to a front landscape where most of the plants in your garden are green. This will bring a pop of red. And it likes here, it says part to full sun, and it is hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit or zones 5 through 8, and slowly reaches 15 to 20 feet tall and 15 feet wide. And this Monrovia plant is $105, actually not a bad price. It is a pretty good size specimen. They also have this beauty, which is the Crimson Queen. This is a lower growing but very wide and kind of ground hugging version of a Japanese maple. It's also a lace leaf. You can see that the foliage is a lot more lacy and has these cuts in them versus the one we just looked at, which has a full leaf. There's actually one we can compare it to right here. See that? That's like a full leaf, and this is considered the lace leaf. Really interesting. It has a gorgeous, graceful arching habit as it grows in the landscape, and this one really makes a statement in a garden. You can see here the Crimson Queen, a Japanese maple, full to part sun, dramatic fall color, eye-catching accent, and these are $179 by Monrovia. You can see the shape of it there, really beautiful. Hardy in zones 5 through 8 down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and this one will get to be up to 10 feet tall and wide in natural form. Again, it's more of a weeper and more of a ground or lower growing kind of arching type tree. Also have this one here, which is even a little bit bigger for $379. It already has a beautiful shape, nice and wide. Instant impact in the garden. Oh my goodness, look at these gorgeous lupine. Are these not the most beautiful coral salmon colored plants? Now, lupine in general, I absolutely love. They have the biggest blooms. They're really kind of like a showstopper. You see this in the garden and they really demand your attention. And this variety is unique. I've never seen it before. It looks like it's coral pink with a bit of yellow in between. And they also have really pretty foliage lupine. Now, I actually bought 2 of these a few days ago when I was running some errands over by another Lowe's. And they are stunning. I actually posted about it on my Facebook page. So if you don't know, I do have a Facebook. You can check that out if you're on Facebook. And I had someone ask whether or not these would become invasive or spread too aggressively, because that is their fear with lupine. And some of the traditional old-fashioned varieties like the purple that tends to be native, those can self-seed and spread themselves around. My mom actually has some of those in her garden, some purple and pink ones. But these hybrid varieties, I find that they don't do that as much. In fact, sometimes I wish they would. I bought a really pretty one a couple of years ago that was a shade of like a blue purple, and it actually only made it 1 season for me. So when I bought these 2, I'm really hopeful that they will survive and come back because I absolutely love them. They're stunning. So let me show you the variety. This is by Monrovia, and it's the West Country Towering Inferno Lupine. They like full sun. They are a perennial, $16.98 for these containers, and they want 6+ hours of direct sun per day, a semi-moist but well-draining soil, and they get to be 1 to 3 feet in height, 2 feet in width. Bloom in summer, hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. The other thing about lupine is that they have a really deep taproot. I actually grew some in the past, the purple variety. I believe they were the Russell's mix. And I grew them using the winter sowing method. They did well. They bloomed on year 2, but they have a super deep taproot, and they got really large in the space that I had them. And when I tried to move them, they didn't make it. So make sure that when you choose a spot for them, it's going to be the place that you leave them, because then if you try to move them, you might lose them. But such gorgeous lupine. Here's a shrub that gets some gorgeous foliage color, and it's really eye-catching at the nursery and in the landscape. It is a willow, and this is a dappled willow called a Coreopsis. Now you can see that the new growth will emerge with some pink coloration, and then it has this kind of speckled cream and green, and even the stems have some red coloring to them. They are really pretty, but they get wild and big, so they need a lot of space. It is what they call a landscape accent shrub. So if you have a large area and you plant these in drift, they're really impactful. My neighbor has one across the street in a standard form, so it's like what they call the tree form, and he planted it in front of a window. So every year he's having to cut it back to keep it size controlled, which is no fun. So if you are going to plant one of these, make sure you put it in an area where it's not going to obstruct your view or get too large for your comfort. So 4 to 6 feet in height, 4 to 6 feet in width, hardy down to a zone 4 or negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. They are deer resistant, and willows like moisture. So if you have an area in the garden that stays a little bit wet, they will perform really well in those areas. And this shrub here is in a Lowe's house brand container, 1.71 gallons for $22.98. And they actually have some of these dappled willows in a tree or standard form here at Lowe's. You can see that they're on a stem or a trunk here with the foliage on top, and these are $59.98. That's what they're going to look like, a decorative kind of statement tree in the garden. The dappled willow Coreopsis, and they want full sun. My Lowe's also sells some concrete statuary, and they have these really pretty bird baths. This one is the hummingbird design, and they also have that Celtic design there, and they're about $59, and you get both the bowl and the pedestal. This would also make an excellent gift for Mother's Day. And look at these beautiful evergreen pines. If you live in a colder climate, adding evergreens to your garden is imperative, in my opinion, so that you have something beautiful to look at in those winter months when all of our perennials are dormant. This here is an Oregon green Austrian pine. It likes full sun, easy care plant, multi-season beauty. $126. This is a Monrovia plant, and it looks like it gets to be, it says grows 18 to 20 feet tall, 15 to feet wide at maturity, hardy in zones 4 through 8. Pines are really hardy, down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can see that this one has all of its spring growth. It pops up these candles here, and over time, if you wanted to size control the size of your pines, you can do the same thing to any variety of pine. You just do what's called candle pruning. You would cut off these growth tips in the spring once they emerge, and that will keep your pine more compact. But a really beautiful specimen here. And an evergreen that I bought myself a few weeks back here at Lowe's. It is the Feeling Sunny Deodar Cedar, and this one has a beautiful golden color to it, and anytime you have an evergreen that has a gold or blue color, putting it in full sun will give you the best coloration. This one is $115. Over time, it can develop a leader, and then it will grow in a pyramidal shape like you see here. And this variety says that it reaches 12 to 15 feet tall if a leader forms, and 8 feet wide, even taller with age. So all of these sizes that you see on the tags are usually for a 10-year garden size. Any plant that is happy will continue to grow beyond what you see listed on the tag. So that is something that you should be aware of. Hardy down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit or zones 7 through 9. And again, evergreens offer a lot of interest in the winter and structure to your garden. And some Spirea, another excellent shrub for the garden. My personal favorite is the candy corn Spirea by Proven Winners. In fact, that's what I thought this one was, because the candy corn has a very similar coloration. But this is actually the Double Play Big Bang by Proven Winners. And in June, here in my 6B7A garden, you will get these large clusters of flowers that look like that, in a shade of hot pink that the pollinators absolutely love. And throughout the rest of the year, it is just a foliage shrub. Now this one does look to go green after it gets this initial bright variation in spring color, and with the pink blooms, that looks really beautiful. It needs about 4 to 6 hours of sun per day. It is hardy in zones 3 through 8 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and stays relatively compact at 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. And these here are in a 2-gallon Proven Winners container for $29.98. And right below, they have another variety of Spirea by First Editions Trees and Shrubs. And this one also has that really pretty variation in spring color. So it has some orange, it almost looks like a little bit of pink at the tip, and some chartreuse green yellow. This is called the Little Spark Spirea, and it is even more compact at only 18 to 24 inches in height and in width. It is hardy in zones 3 through 8, and you can see the foliage is orange, yellow. So it could be that it has this color foliage all season long. In fact, it does look like it has definitely a chartreuse yellow colored foliage with, again, those clusters of pink blooms at some point in the summertime. Little Spark Spirea. And these are in a 2-gallon container by First Editions for $27.98. Here's a really fun and compact evergreen. This is a bird's nest spruce, and it's currently putting on all of its new season's growth. This happens in the spring. It gets these little bubbles at the end with really bright spring color, really interesting to look at. And here is the information on this variety. It is a Monrovia shrub, the nest spruce, Pisces abies nidiformis. It is a full to part sun shrub, stays compact, easy care, $47.98 for this one. And you can see the shape in which it grows, kind of like a mounding habit. It's slow growing, reaching 3 to 5 feet tall and 4 to 6 feet wide, hardy in zones 2 through 8 or down to -50 degrees Fahrenheit. So a very hardy shrub. And my Lowe's is also having a limited time deal on their 1-pint annuals for 5 for $5, so $1 each. And it looks like here they mostly have petunias in shades of pink, purple, there are some white and some red, and even some marigolds. And some pretty annuals. Look at this really beautiful yellow petunia. This is $16.98 in the Lowe's house brand containers. It looks like it's a mix. There's some yellow and some of this really pretty fuchsia pink. And look at this gorgeous hanging basket. This is a Proven Winners one. And I have found that both at Home Depot and Lowe's, they are doing these container recipes or hanging baskets that already have several plants combined that look gorgeous together. This one looks to have some type of double impatient. It has this like kind of polka dot plant and some of the diamond frost euphorbia. If you're ever curious about what the plants are in the container, or if you want to use them as inspiration, you can look at the tag here and it will tell you this is the Gloria Rose recipe of the year for 2020, $36.98 for these hanging baskets, and it typically tells you the variety of the plants that are in that container. So right here you can see it is the diamond frost euphorbia, the Proven Accents hippo rose, and the Rockapulco rose impatient. Really pretty. Here's another hanging basket container with the Candyland recipe. 3 really pretty bright colors. And when we flip it over, it tells us that it's the Super Bells Dreamsicle, the Super Bells Pink, and the Super Bells Yellow. And this is a full sun hanging basket for $44.98. And it does have a decorative planter. And it's Mother's Day this weekend, so something like this would make an excellent gift. I love to look at these container recipes that they put together at the store because it serves as great inspiration for creating your own containers. So even if you didn't want to buy one of these hanging baskets, you can kind of see which plants they put together and create your own containers. So here you can see that they have some really pretty light blue lobelia, some of this striped calibrachoa or super bell, and what looks to be the Bordeaux petunia, which is a super tunia. Really vigorous grow. I've grown it before. It's excellent. And that looks really pretty together. So they're calling this combination the Bahama Beach. And on the back again, it will tell you the varieties: the Super Tunia Bordeaux, Super Bell's Lemon Slice, and Laguna Sky Blue. If you want a lobelia to grow in your garden, in your containers this summer, this Sky Blue, Laguna Sky Blue, is an excellent lobelia. I have had some in the past that have fizzled out really quickly. This one went nonstop for me all season long in a part shade location. As long as I watered it regularly, it was gorgeous. Made it all the way through the fall. And this is another really pretty combination. It looks like it has the Super Tunia Bermuda Beach, some light yellow Super Bells, and then the lobelia Sky Blue. This one is called Bermuda Skies. And it does Super Tunia Bermuda Beach, Laguna Sky Blue lobelia, and Super Bell's Yellow Chiffon. Another really gorgeous container combination. And some Nepeta, also known as Catmint. This is a quintessential garden perennial that any sunny border should have. It is gorgeous. Not only does it have these really pretty purple blooms, but the foliage smells minty, which means that deer and rabbit don't like the fragrance and they stay away from it. It pairs beautifully with other spring bloomers like peonies and roses because they bloom around the same time. And this variety is by Proven Winners. It's called the Cat's Meow. And it likes full sun. If you put it in too much shade, it can sometimes split in the center and not bloom as well. It was the Landscape Perennial of the Year for 2025. This 2-quart container is $12.98, and this variety gets to be a medium height of 17 to 20 inches and needs 24 to 36 inch spacing. Hardy in zones 3 through 8 or down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, and it likes full sun. And if you're going shopping for Mother's Day plants this weekend, I would caution you against picking up any of these hydrangeas. They look really pretty in the store, oftentimes in really pretty shades of pink and blue, but these are what they call florist hydrangeas, and they've been forced to grow in a greenhouse in time for Easter and for Mother's Day, which means they're not very hardy. And a lot of times when you plant these out in your garden, you will most likely just get foliage and hardly ever, if ever, get blooms. So if you're going to spend $21.98 on a hydrangea, I'm going to give you a better option. What you want to do instead, grab one of these 1 gallon containers of the endless summer hydrangeas for $19.98, and this is one that will do beautifully for you in your garden. Now there are a couple of varieties here. The Bloomstruck is a really good one because it has reblooming, first of all, so that you will continue to get blooms throughout the season, but it has these really pretty red stems. This is what's called a macrophylla type hydrangea, or a mop head big leaf hydrangea. What influences the color of your blooms is the acidity in your soil. If you have a more acidic soil, your hydrangea will lean blue, and if you have a more alkaline soil, they will be more purple pink. But these are great because the endless summer have been bred to bloom on old wood and new wood, because some of the older varieties of macrophylla hydrangeas bloom on old wood only. And what that means is if you get a late spring frost, a lot of times it can nip those buds and you might not get blooms. Or if you prune them at the incorrect time, you might not get blooms. So there's less of a chance of that happening with these endless summer variety hydrangeas. They also have the summer crush in stock and the traditional endless summer. So this is a much better option. These are $21.98 for the 1.5 gallon. So I would recommend getting one of these hydrangeas versus those pretty colorful florist hydrangeas, because these come back a lot more reliably than those would. And here is the original variety, and this one here gets to be 3 to 5 feet tall and wide, and it is hardy in zones 4 through 9. And look at those gorgeous blooms. It's what you equate with the Cape Cod and Nantucket summers. Beautiful. The Summer Crush is also listed as a reblooming hydrangea, and this one is even more compact, getting only 18 to 36 inches tall and wide. So great to tuck into any size garden. Hardy in zones 4 through 9. And the Bloomstruck, look at that, gorgeous. This one's also a rebloomer, and it is hardy in zones 4 through 9, and this one gets to be 3 to 4 feet tall and 4 to 5 feet wide. And some 12 packs of annuals for $13.98. They have some really pretty varieties of coleus. Look at that. Gorgeous. My husband George calls these gremlin skin. If you were a kid of the 80s and watched the Gremlins, you'll know exactly what he means by that. But these small ones are really easy to just take out and tuck into your containers. They also have this one here that reminds me of watermelon. It's pink and green, and then this really pretty orange colored one with the green margin at the bottom. They also have these 1.5 gallon hanging baskets of coleus for $12.98. And some beautiful tropical plants to give yourself a feeling of being on vacation on your pool decks and patios this summer. And one of my favorite summer blooming annuals that is drought tolerant, loves the heat and the sun, is Mandevilla and Dipladenia. Now they go by 2 different names because they have different growth habits. The Dipladenia is more of a bushing variety, where the Mandevilla is more of a vining variety. And they come in some really beautiful, fun and bright colors. Some reds, some pinks, and I've even seen some yellows. They also often come in white. So they have these larger containers of Dipladenia, almost a 2 gallon, for $19.98. And when I tell you these go nonstop, they really go nonstop, from right now in spring all the way through fall when we get our first hard frost. Shiny green foliage, drought tolerant. I can sometimes even go a day between waterings, tough as nails, and the pollinators like it. The hummingbirds, I always find them going in there, which is great. They also have the ready fill containers here at Lowe's. This is the medium size, which fits an 11.7 inch decorative planter. So if you are a person who doesn't really like combining your own plants to do your summer arrangements, you can just grab one of these at the store, pop them into your container, and you are good to go. $21.98 for this medium size here at Lowe's. This one here has a Dracaena spike, some petunias, as well as some verbena. You can see this is a trailing verbena foliage. And this one on the side also has that Dracaena spike. It has some of these yellow petunias, as well as some blue lobelia, and also some verbena. Some peonies. If you don't have a peony in your garden, I highly recommend getting one. These are some herbaceous varieties, and the herbaceous varieties on average get to be about 36 inches in height and in width. But because they have such large, beautiful blooms, they do need some staking in order for them to stay upright and not flop on the ground. You can do that with some bamboo stakes and some twine, or you can even buy those grow through grids that they sell. Now, some people start to fret when they see ants on the heads of their peonies that are getting ready to bloom, and they worry that there's something wrong or that they're infested with some kind of pest. That is completely normal. The ants are just going over that sweet nectar that starts to come out of that bud as it's getting ready to open. It's almost like part of the process. Once you see the ants, you know that your peony is about to bloom. But this is a wonderful heirloom type plant. They last for years and years. You'll often hear people say, oh, I have a peony division from my grandmother's yard, and that's a lot of fun. But a really great plant. They come in so many different colors, and this variety happens to be the Happy Pink Peony. It's an upright perennial, 1998, and they do like a good amount of sun in order for them to produce more bloom buds and bloom best. This one is my absolute favorite herbaceous peony. I have several varieties of herbaceous and etos, and the etos are a little bit more sturdy. They're a cross between a tree peony and an herbaceous peony. But this Sarah Bernhardt is so fragrant. It's a light pink bloom, and it has so many petals. It almost looks like a rose. Just gorgeous. This one's $29.98, and it is hardy down to a zone 4 or negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. They're also deer and rabbit resistant. They don't touch them. And this variety that we looked at, the Happy Pink Peony, is hardy. It says here down to a zone 4 as well, negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. They're really hardy. The one thing you want to be careful of when you plant your peony when you get home is not to plant it too deep. Once you get rid of all of this filler stuff that's in here, you want to plant it just at soil level. If you plant your eyes too deep, sometimes your peony won't bloom as well. So that's something important to take note of. And Nephofia, or red hot pokers. These are a gorgeous vertical upright type perennial that is really going to make a statement in the garden. When people see them, they're like, what is that plant? And the hummingbirds absolutely love these tubular shaped blooms. They get right in there and get a snack, and it's so fun to watch. But even when they're not in bloom, they have this grassy texture at the base of the plant, which looks like an ornamental grass. So even when they don't have their bloom stalks, they're a nice looking tidy perennial. So there are two varieties here. These are both by proven winners. This one is called the Pyromania Rockets Red Glare, which this one is a bit spent now, so you can see that it's faded, but it starts off, it almost has a gradient or ombre color effect. It starts this pretty coral color at the top, and it will fade gradually to almost like this cream color at the bottom. And it gets to be pretty tall, 30 to 36 inches in height. They're hardy in zones 6 through 9 or down to negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit and bloom early to midsummer. And this really bright and colorful yellow variety is called the Solar Flare Pyromania Nephofia by proven winners. $15.98 for these in a 1 gallon container. They like full sun, and again, 36 to 42 inches in height, 24 to 30 inch spacing, hardy in zone 6 through 9. Some beautiful red classic geraniums in the Lowe's house brand containers. This is a decorative planter, $16.98. These are really pretty. My father-in-law loved these. He specifically liked the red and those red orange ones. They're really pretty. And some New Guinea impatiens. I love these. These are a great option for a shadier garden. I also love the sun patiens because the sun patiens can take a lot of sun, and they're such a low fuss annual compared to petunias that can sometimes get some bud worms and get a little leggy and need a haircut throughout the summer. These go non-stop, and because they have those thicker stems similar to what you see on begonias and on coleus, they retain a lot of moisture, so you can sometimes get away with not having to water as frequently. You know, during the height of the summer where sometimes you have to water those annuals twice a day, you can get by with once a day on these most of the time, but they are really great annuals, and these are $16.98 also in these decorative Lowe's house brand planters. And Coreopsis. Now this from far away looks like a marigold, but it's actually a frilly variety of Coreopsis. This is a very long blooming perennial for any garden. You can see that there are tons of buds on this plant. Some of the single petal varieties look very much like Cosmos, except that this is the perennial version. So this is a Monrovia plant. You can see here it's called the Golden Sphere Coreopsis. It likes Full Sun, $10.98 for these. It's an easy care water wise plant, and when you read something says water wise, that usually tells you that it's pretty drought tolerant once it's established. It wants 6+ hours of direct sun per day. It gets to be 10 to 18 inches in height, 12 to 18 inches in width, blooms in summer and hardy down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you're looking for some of the quart-sized Proven Winners annuals and you don't have a Home Depot nearby, because we saw some on sale there last week, Lowe's also carries them. And there are some of the more popular varieties. This is a really pretty white one called the Supertunia Vista Snowdrift. Then they also have the Supertunia Mini Vista Hot Pink. And there are some more on the other side. Let's go take a look. Super Bell's Yellow in a really pretty light buttery yellow. This one is real pretty as well. Look at that. This one is called the Super Bell's Holy Smokes. And then this cherry one we saw last week was gorgeous. Look at this. Isn't that so pretty? That dark, deep red. This one's called Supertunia Black Cherry. And they have quite a bit on the top shelf here. And what else do we see here? Oh, this is a pretty one with a yellow eye and a white bloom. It's called Super Bell's Over Easy. I can see that. It kind of looks like a little egg, doesn't it? This is also a real pretty one. The fuchsia pink with the green edges. It's called the Supertunia Picasso in purple. This one here is called Super Bell's Honey. There you go. It's a very pretty kind of light pink with a yellow throat. This pretty fuchsia and yellow striped one is called Cherry Star, and there is yet another really pretty orange one. So tons of them. They also have some Nemesia down here in yellow. This one here is, it looks like orange dreamsicle. Yeah, Super Bell's Dreamsicle. So if you're looking for Proven Winners annuals, check out your Home Depot and Lowe's. They have quite a selection at the moment in most locations. And an excellent ground cover that I love in my garden is Ajuga. It has these beautiful leaves, but it blooms in spring with these little blue, very bright spike type flowers that are only about 4 to 6 inches in height. Now this variety is the Catmint's giant Ajuga. You can see it has really large foliage. There's all different kinds. I have one called Burgundy Glow that has variegated foliage in shades of pinks, greens, and creams. There's also one called Chocolate Chip, which has really small foliage, but they all get those purple spike type blooms at some point in the spring. It does like part sun, and it is a ground cover, which means over time it will spread horizontally, creating kind of like a rug or a mat. And what that means is it's going to cover your soil and act as a living mulch. So over time you will have to apply less of your wood chips or mulch, and this will do the same job of retaining your soil, keeping the roots of your plants moist, and crowding out weeds. And these are in the Monrovia container for $4.48 for this quart-sized container. Catmint's giant Ajuga is hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. It's about 6 inches in height, 24 inches in width, but more with time as it does spread. And it wants 3 to 6 hours of morning sun per day in a moist but well-draining soil. And some foxgloves. Now this is a quintessential cottage garden flower. They're tall, beautiful, pollinators love them, but they are toxic. So if you have pets or children that frequent your garden, something to be aware of. Now this variety is the Dotty Warm Rose Foxglove. It likes full sun. It is hardy down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit. Now in most cases they are biennial. In fact, this is listed as a biennial, which means in the first year they work on roots and foliage development, and in year 2 you will get a beautiful bloom stalk. So that tells me that these are probably 2-year plants at this point. So if you bring them home, they might bloom for you this year. They'll drop some seeds. You might get some baby seedlings, but you probably won't get more flowers for another 2 years out of those seedlings if they do drop them. But these are really pretty plants. And at the sale that they currently have for these Lowe's house brand containers at 2 for $10, that would be a great price to pick them up at. In case they don't come back next year, at least you get to enjoy them for this year. But I really love foxgloves. Well, that brings us to the end of the May inventory here at Lowe's. I hope that you've enjoyed checking out what my store has in stock, and I hope that you can find some of these varieties and sales near you. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.